All right, guys. So the PS5 generation it's been questionable on a lot of fronts, right? I think a lot of um mistakes were made early on as far as the vision of what the PS5 was going to be. I think riding the high of the PS4 generation, Sony was, a little big-headed. Um Invested a lot of their time into live service games, porting their games over to PC, doing things that were fundamentally against everything that most PlayStation gamers have been used to since the PS3 of doubling down on, new IPs, your homegrown studios, really, focusing in on the console space and this ecosystem that they kind of cultivated from PS3 to PS4. And it created a culture that a lot of, the fan base gravitated towards, right? This certain style of game that, we all liked. The narrative games, the single player games, the God of Wars, Ghost of Tsushima's, Horizons, etc., right? And all throughout PS5, they've kind of been pulling away everything that we kind of appreciated. We haven't had a whole lot of new IPs. We haven't had a whole lot of console exclusives. A lot of studios were focusing on making live service games. Hence, like the marathons, the Concords, Horizons Hunter Gathering, etc. Right. Anyways, fast forward to 2026, right? When it's clear that the live service initiative is no longer the push, right? They're releasing the last group of them, I think it feels like, from Marathon to Hunter's Gathering, what Fair Games will probably be canceled, etc., right? So we all see that. And today they announced, well, not they yet, but it's, announced by Jason Schreier that Sony plans to stop porting games over to PC, specifically the single player games, right? Like your marathons and stuff like that will still be available on PC. But games like Soros, Wolverine, etc., like they're single player games, they're known IP stuff like that are going to be sticking to the console, and that I think is a good sign. I think the PC like push didn't really make sense to me. I feel like it was kind of like a watered down version of Xbox's play anywhere strategy where they're just kind of putting their games everywhere. um, I think the thing that makes PlayStation unique is the fact that they have experiences, games, stories, whatever that can only be experienced on that console. When you think of, you know, the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 eras, like yeah, they had third-party games, but they were exclusive to those consoles. You couldn't play Final Fantasy 7 on a Nintendo 64 or whatever Sega Dreamcast or Sega Saturn was out. So you couldn't do what you could do on the PlayStation on the other consoles, right? And that's kind of what the console space was for the longest time. That's what gaming was for a long time, was these console exclusives. I remember having an Xbox, and my friend had a GameCube down the street, and we had to, if we wanted to play those games, my mom was not going to buy me a GameCube. I had to trade him for the week, the Xbox with a game for a GameCube with a game. Like you had to make those changes, those sacrifices for those period of time if you wanted to play, Mario Sunshine and you wanted to play Halo. A lot of households didn't have, two consoles or three consoles. Like I was lucky enough that I had the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. I had the PS3 and the 360. But if you think I was going to have the PS3, Xbox 360 Wii, no way. At least not me. In the same household at the same time, no way. I would have to go to my friend's house to get to play the Wii or something like that. So this new, I think, era, like as people say it's good for the consumers, I think it sucks to be a gamer in it, to be honest with you, because as you notice, like PlayStation slowed down on making their games. Like we've had so much fewer games released exclusive to the PS5 this generation than any other generation in PlayStation history, pretty much. We're not counting, we don't count PS1, PS2 yet because like that was like the foundation of it. But PS3, PS4, like you had games like Infamous, you had God of War 3, you had, Killzone, you had Ghost of Tsushima that came out. Like they were, chock full of games that were new and crazy and, boundary pushing and oh my god, like blockbuster experiences like Uncharted and stuff like that. And they pivoted away from that. And ever since then, like don't get me wrong, like I love a lot of games that released this, within this space. I like Astrobot, I like Returnal, um, Ghost of Yotei, I love Spider-Man 2, I like a lot. Like I like a lot of like the games they made, but it does suck if you were to rewind time and imagine, a what if scenario of what if we didn't do the live service game, thing? What if, Naughty Dog never had to go make factions? Like, what if, you know, Blue Point never went off to make God of War live service or whatever? Like, what if these developers were just working on like single player narrative games? We would have had so much more games, I think. You know, Bend Studios would have released another game. London Studios would have released another game. Like, we would have had a lot more, you know, games into space release if not for, you know, this push for live service games. And the PC ports, I think, is a good idea to cancel that, to stop that, because I think you do need to have like some like walled garden to like say, hey, like, look, if you want these experiences, you got to come to us. And I think that's a good culture to have, especially if you're PlayStation. You know, like you see what happened with Xbox, you see what they did over there, and when you look at what Nintendo's doing, where like, look, if you want to play Mario Kart World, you got to go Nintendo Switch too. Point blank, period, no discussion, right? They have Pokemon games. Their biggest, you know, the biggest entertainment, you know, IP in the world is coming exclusively to a Switch too. They're not doing a Nintendo Switch. They're not moving it over to PC. Not like, no, no, no. Like, you have to get the Switch too if you want to get the next gen Pokemon game. Hell, if you want to get Pokemon Pocopia, you have to have a Switch too. And that creates fervor. That creates a demand. And you know, this is a demand type of ecosystem, America, or capitalism, stuff like that. Like, no one's gonna buy something if you don't demand them to do it. If there's not a reason to want to get it, if you know, PC gamers are very, very, very persistent. If they see a game coming out on PlayStation and it's not coming out to PC day one, they will wait for that to come out to PC. Then they'll wait for it to get discounted like crazy on PC. You know, like they don't need to play PlayStation games. If they needed to play PlayStation games, they would have had a PlayStation a long time ago, right? PC gamers spend how much money on their rigs? Why would they, like, they haven't been playing PlayStation games not because they couldn't afford it. They could have. They just didn't want to. That's not the games they want to do. And I think when you try to cater to all audiences, you stop catering to any audience. I think PlayStation is learning that the hard way, that it's time, you know, the experiment, you tried it, you tried to cater to as much people as possible and it did not work. If you floundered and you suffered for it, and culturally they lost what made PlayStation PlayStation. So I guess what I'm saying in this whole video is I'm just glad that PlayStation seems like they got their head on straight again. They seem like their heads down, focusing on what makes them special, and you double down on that, right? You, you do God of War remake, right? You make those three games again, because freaking shit, people want that. You know, we want to play those games again. We want single player narratives again. This year alone, finally, we're getting Soros, we're getting Marvel Tokon, we're getting freaking Wolverine. Like, this is a great year for PlayStation, and like, it sucks that it takes 6 years into the console life, you know, span to get a year like this. And you know, maybe people are like, oh my god, like, I wanted to play that game on PC where it like might look better or whatever. You know, boohoo, get a PlayStation. Like, I'm sorry, but it's just, there needs to be more competition in the gaming space. That's not just more games releasing, because there is so many games releasing. There is competition in the gaming space, but it's not the right type of competition. I think, you know, the console manufacturers, the hardware manufacturers need to be in competition with each other to create a better ecosystem for gamers, in my opinion. So, you know, this new report, for me, it's a good sign. I'm very excited. I'm hoping PlayStation goes back to what makes PlayStation PlayStation, and I can't wait to, you know, I can't wait for this year to come out. I feel like this is a good year where I think we're coming back to what PlayStation is, coming back to what gaming is, you know. And it sucks that we have to lose Bluepoint and other studios, you know, in this process. But at least the future looks brighter, in my opinion. Anyways, that's my final thoughts on this rant. I just kind of wanted to talk about this for a little bit. I'll see you guys on the next one.